Hare Krishna. Today we are continuing our series on Bhagavad Gita with an overview of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Om Jnanatimidandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is entitled Sankhya Yoga. It is about the science of soul and action. Sankhya is a Sanskrit word literally meaning enumeration. It means looking at the reality of this world, breaking it down, and trying to understand what is reality. This is where Krishna begins to address Arjuna's doubts. So it begins with explaining about the soul versus the body, how the soul is eternal, indestructible, and immutable. The analogies are given. There is an analogy of changing bodies, which is like the changing of garments. Death is like the changing of discarding worn-out clothes and putting on new clothes. The necessity of tolerating the changes which are inherent in this world. Happiness and distress are temporary states. There's no happiness that lasts forever, and there's no suffering that lasts forever. Everything has a beginning and middle and an end. And then Sri Krishna begins to talk about the path of steady intelligence, or yoga, how to be like the tortoise and withdraw our senses from the sense objects, and how to act with detachment in karma yoga. And then there's also a description of the cycle that develops from attachment and lust, becoming too much attached to the objects of the senses, and how this leads to anger. This is Sankhya Yoga, and it is basically a summary of the entire Bhagavad Gita. A very brief summary. It's kind of like the bridge going from Arjuna's emotional crisis and talking about the importance of transitioning to the spiritual view and understanding the ultimate liberation of the self. So we're going to look at the movement from grief to equilibrium through three pillars. One is Sankhya, or analytical knowledge. Another is Buddhi Yoga, the art of work. And finally, Sthita Prajna, the state of being situated in wisdom. So what's the crisis here? The opening of the chapter is Arjuna saying that he is overwhelmed. His eyes are full of tears. He's paralyzed by a conflict between his emotions, his compassion for kin, and his social responsibility. He's confused about his duty, and he refuses to fight. So he then surrenders to Krishna, and he asks for definitive instruction. One verse, Arjuna says, it would be better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Now, it's important to note that Arjuna, as a kshatriya, as a warrior, it would be a very shameful and dishonorable thing for a kshatriya to beg. Kshatriyas would never go begging. But he is saying, I would rather do this. I would do that thing, which is considered to be a very lowly occupation for a kshatriya, rather than to go kill great persons who are my teachers and my seniors. So now, Krishna first chastises Arjuna. He says, Klaibyam mas magama partha. O Arjuna, how has this impotence come upon you? It is hridaya darbalyam. It is a weakness of the heart. This is a very petty state. It's really not befitting you. Krishna argues that this behavior, it does not befit an Aryan, which means one who knows the value of life. Unfortunately, this term was later co-opted by certain people, but Aryan means one who knows the higher values of life. The narrative pivot is very clear. The solution to grief is not to wallow in pity, but to rise to a higher understanding, and that is what Krishna is offering Arjuna. So, this brings us to the fundamental truth. One of the fundamental, it is so fundamental, without understanding the difference between matter and spirit, it's not possible to imbibe any of these truths of yoga, and particularly not Bhakti Yoga. So our presentation of the Gita is following the presentation of our Gurudev, which is following in the Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition. And the Bhagavad Gita is, above all, it gives an overview of every system of yoga. Buddhi yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, sannyas yoga, and bhakti yoga. But it is especially giving a message about the essential nature of bhakti yoga. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in our presentations on the Gita. So there's this fundamental dichotomy between prakriti, or matter, and atma, or the soul. So the nature of matter is that it's temporary, it's changing, it is subject to birth and death. And the atma is eternal and unchanging. The atma existed in the past, exists now, and will exist in the future. There is one of the key verses, verse 12 of the second chapter. Natu evaham na jatu nasam na tvam neme janadipa na chaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayam ataparam. O Arjun, there was never a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all of the kings present on this battlefield. And in the future, there will not be a time when any of us cease to be. This is describing the eternal nature of the soul. So, and then he says that Nana Shochanti Pandita, the wise persons do not lament either for the living nor for the dead. We experience grief as a product of misidentifying the eternal self with the temporary physical form. That is not the same as being indifferent to the sufferings of the world. It is simply saying that this world has an inherent nature. Because of the temporary nature of this world, nothing is going to last. Everyone, as soon as they are born, jatasya dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha. He says, Krishna is saying, that as soon as you are born, death is certain. But as soon as you die, birth is also certain. So there is no, even though the body perishes, the soul will go on. So this is described in a very, a set of very important verses from about 212 up till about 230. Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya anyani samyati navani dehi. When one takes off a set of clothes and puts on new clothes, this is like the person who is passing from one body to the next. And then there's another verse which gives a different example. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namohyati. So he gives the example. You were a child once, right? And then you grow up. You become a youth, a young person, and then you become an old man. Are you a different person? No, you are the same person. Now, someone may answer, oh, wait a minute, I'm the same person because I have the same memories. If you took all my memories, I wouldn't be the same person. And we argue, no, it would simply be you are the same person, but you have a lapse of memory. Something has transformed in your nature. But you, because the you is that spark. It is the Atma, the soul, which resides in the region of the heart. So just as you are the same person as when you were a child, when you were a baby, and then you were a child, and then you were a young man or a young woman, and then you were an adult, and then eventually we become old. I didn't really understand this when I was young. Somehow, when we're young, we tend to think that we'll live forever, but it's not that way. We all get old eventually. So then when we come in old age, we finally come to the point of death. It is like giving up a set of clothes, and there is an example given. Like, I have an undershirt under this kurta, Okay, if I take off my outer clothes and then I put on a new set of clothes, these undergarments, these are like the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. They stay with you from one birth to the next, but they change, they transform. They stay with you and they change. So the Atma in the body of an animal, for example, is the same Atma that may have previously been a big, statesman, a person who was head of state of a country, but they became a dog because of their consciousness and activities. It's not like we have anything against dogs, but they're animals. They don't have the capability to understand higher consciousness. They don't have the capability to hear about Bhagavad Gita and engage in Bhakti. We can do things that help animals, but they will be benefited when they can come in the human form of life and they can engage in yoga processes, especially Bhakti yoga. So, the subtle body changes but stays with us, covering the soul, but it is not the same as the soul. The soul, the Atma, is where desires are reflected in the mind, where the will to action is reflected in the intelligence, and where our sense of relationship is reflected in the ahankar, or false ego. So this is some very, very important, essential truth that we need to understand. And this is being given in this kind of essential chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Now, there are also attributes of the soul, the Atma. We like to use the Sanskrit term Atma because sometimes people say, I believe my soul is the air I breathe, and something a bit vague like that. Atma is very specific. In Shvetashvatara Upanishad, it is said, Keshagrashata bhagasya shatadha kalpitasya cha. If you divide the tip of a hair into 100 parts and then again into 100 parts, 1/10,000th the size of the tip of a hair. So that's about 50 angstroms in scientific terms. That is the dimension of the Atma that's given in the Upanishads. And in Bhagavad Gita, but the Atma is not something that you can measure with scientific instruments. You can measure the presence of the Atma by one thing. When the Atma is present, we say that the person is living. When the Atma has left the body, we say, oh, look, here is a dead body. That's how we can measure the presence of the Atma. It is only by a logical inference and it's not going to show up on an oscilloscope or a voltmeter or any kind of made-up meter or anything like that. So the Atma is unborn and it's immutable. It has no beginning and no end. There's never a time when the Atma didn't exist. The Atma is indestructible. You can't cut by weapons. You can't moisten the Atma by water, and you cannot burn the Atma by fire. You cannot burn the Atma in a nuclear explosion. You cannot burn the Atma with a high-powered laser or anything like that. The Atma is beyond this material energy. It is a spark of pure spiritual energy, but it's enmeshed in ego and the other coverings, the other layers of material existence. So now Krishna goes on to explain that happiness and distress are not permanent states of reality. They arise from the interaction of the senses with the world. They are like the winter and summer seasons. Okay, so the winter and summer seasons go. Right now in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the winter season. It's cold. Some parts of the U.S. right now are buried under snow and ice and horrible winter storm conditions. People down in Florida are saying, oh my goodness, it's going to get down to freezing. We have to go look for our winter jackets. But still, it's winter, and people are experiencing winter in their own way. And there's duality. Then in summer, in some places, people are going to say, oh, it's so hot. I can't live without the AC on. But Krishna is saying that these dualities, happiness and distress, are just like the way these seasons change. They come and they go. It's duality. What we have to learn is how to tolerate the dualities of happiness and distress in this world without being disturbed. So we have to gain this kind of resilience, not being disturbed. If we are disturbed, then our minds are going to be looking for remedies. We want to have a solution. Oh my God, my AC went out. Maybe I need a better AC system. And we are just in a loop and we're thinking about all these things. But in reality, being able to tolerate is very, very important. There was this German philosopher Karl Popper who said, we should not tolerate intolerance. And he is referring, of course, to humanity. But in general, it's actually a good thing. It's good to not be intolerant. It is good to learn to tolerate. But we should tolerate in a spiritual way. We should see that, okay, look, this world is not going to be perfect and there are going to be problems, and I should learn to tolerate them. That's not to say that we'll just sit and let other people abuse us or other things, but we also have to learn to be able to tolerate, because this world can never be perfect. Okay, that's a very important thing to move forward in spiritual practice. Now, there is the concept of prescribed duty. What is the prescribed duty? So Krishna is also addressing this for Arjuna. What is dharma? So if you look at the social position, forgetting about philosophy, there is still a duty that must be done. And for a kshatriya, there is no better engagement than to fight for the right cause. A kshatriya is a class of people who are willing to fight, who are ready to fight for a righteous cause. Nowadays, people use righteousness sometimes as a kind of an all-purpose spray paint that they'll just spray over anything and say, look how righteous we are. That's why we're all angry and we're going to fight because we're righteous. But righteousness means understanding what dharma is. What is the right thing? Now, in this case, the battlefield of Kurukshetra was a test of dharma. Duryodhana represented the forces of irreligion or adharma. Duryodhana was someone who was dishonest, who was duplicitous, who liked to take advantage of others, who could bend others to his will. And he was representing the forces of hypocrisy. And Krishna is the ultimate source of dharma, and he was telling Arjuna, I need you to fight. This is a righteous battle and you must fight. Arjuna was reluctant. He was saying that it seems that this is going to be a very harmful thing to society. And then Krishna also uses an additional argument, and he says that a respectable person, if you do this giving up the battlefield and go begging, it is worse than death. People will speak badly of you. You have to engage and you have to do your duty. So now we come to the topic of Buddhi Yoga. So Krishna has given Arjuna some intellectual, some analytical knowledge, Sankhya Yoga, and now Krishna is introducing the idea of Buddhi Yoga, intelligence related to bhakti or devotional service. How can we work without bondage? One has to, first of all, have equal-mindedness in both success and failure. So Krishna says you have a right to perform your duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. So think about that for just a minute. We have a right to perform our duty. We have a right to do the right thing, but we don't get to dictate the results. Sometimes the results will be favorable and sometimes not. But nowadays, people tend to get upset when things don't go their way, and that's really works against our spiritual progress. So we have to develop equal-mindedness so that we can, if we want to transform our ordinary work into yoga, or karma yoga, or bhakti yoga, we have to be able to give up this strong attachment and expectation and demand that the results must suit us. This is actually a very non-spiritual approach that takes us very much away from any path of progress. So what is the formula to become free from karma? So there is the right to work, and there is no claim to fruits, and this leads to liberation. So you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. So how do we do this? If we can do work without attachment to the results, and if we offer the results of our work to Krishna, to Bhagavan, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we will become free from the bondage of karma. Action only binds us when we are attached to the outcome. This is such a very important and sublime thing to understand. There's the example that my Gurudev used to give. There's a monkey, and the monkey is troubling a farmer. Let's say the farmer has a banana plantation, and the monkey is coming, and the monkey just doesn't take one banana. The monkey will take a banana, and he will pull down other bananas and throw them on the ground. So the farmer says, this monkey is making mischief. I have to take this monkey away. People won't kill monkeys because they consider that monkeys are living beings with the right to live, and they are also associated with Hanumanji. So monkey killing is just not done, but people will catch the monkey and take it away somewhere far away, take it out in the jungle, and it can live, it can find its own fruits. So how does the farmer trap the monkey? He'll put a jar, a pot that has a narrow mouth and a wide body, and inside the body of the pot, he'll put some very nice piece of fruit, something the monkey likes, maybe a banana or maybe a small mango or something. So the monkey will come, and the pot will have a chain around it. The monkey will come, and it will reach its hand inside the pot and grab the fruit. But as it tries to take the fruit out of the pot, its hand closed around the fruit won't let it pull out. All the monkey has to do is let go of the fruit, but the monkey won't do that because the monkey's nature is to be very stubborn and to cling. So the monkey is clinging to the fruit. No, it's my fruit. It's my fruit. I won't let go. And the monkey is trapped. The monkey cannot get away, and the jar is chained. So now the farmer hears the monkey screeching and chattering and can come and capture the monkey and take the monkey somewhere else. So this idea of not being attached to the outcome of work is extremely important. So now Arjuna wants to know, because Krishna has said, these are the symptoms of someone who is situated in transcendence, someone who is called sthita prajna, someone who is actually fixed in their knowledge and their position. So Arjuna asks 4 questions. How does spiritual realization manifest in the behavior of one who is in trance or samadhi, who is fixed in trance? What are the symptoms or characteristics of that person? How does that person sit? What's their state of stability? How are they when they're relaxed? What is their speech? How does that person speak? What's the language of the mind? And how does that person walk? How does that person engage with the world? This is the question that Arjuna asks. And Krishna explains. Krishna explains to Arjuna what are the symptoms, how that person is not disturbed. There is an incessant flow of the input of the senses into the mind. And Krishna says, just like rivers flow into the ocean, but the ocean never overflows. And that is how the mind of that person who is situated in transcendence is undisturbed by sensory input. And now we come to part of the solution. How do we move past this being pulled by sensory attraction? So there is the lower taste and higher taste. If we simply try to restrict our sense activities, if we try to just artificially say, no, I'm not going to eat the chocolate, I'm not going to eat the chocolate, we're thinking about the chocolate all the time. What's going to happen? Eventually, we will rationalize and we'll convince ourselves, well, just this one piece. So restriction doesn't really work. It means that we are thinking about the objects of the senses, but we still have that taste for them. So how do we actually transcend our taste for sense enjoyment, which distracts us from spiritual life? It only ceases when one experiences a higher taste through realization of the Supreme. A self-realized person can find complete satisfaction in the self alone and is able to renounce all material desires naturally. This is a very, very important thing to understand. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinam rasavarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. That person who restricts from the objects of the senses, who withdraws from the objects of senses, but is internally meditating on them, is not able to become detached. Only when one experiences realization of the Supreme, the higher taste, then one is able to find complete satisfaction in the self. So there is a methodology. The external strategy is the tortoise. So a tortoise can, of course, withdraw its limbs into its shell and close up. If the predator comes and starts sniffing and trying to eat it, the tortoise is able to withdraw into its armored fortress. A self-realized person is able to withdraw the senses from sense objects. So this is a conscious control mechanism. By withdrawing the senses, one achieves a state of steady intelligence, undisturbed by misery. Now, what do we mean exactly by withdrawing the senses? Let's say, for example, and I know that many women would be able to relate to this, if someone is staring at you and they're like this staring, you have a sense that someone's looking at me, someone's staring at me, and it's disturbing. This is what's known as someone is extending their senses and reaching out. Withdrawing is just the opposite. Instead of extending, bring the senses inward. Look for an inward state of happiness. Like we can tell someone, if you're not satisfied with a little, you won't be satisfied with a lot. And self-satisfaction means you have to have a source of happiness that the Atma can connect to. So this is very important. Now, there is also a very, very important lesson that Krishna tells Arjuna here. He says, dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho bijayate krodhad bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibhrama smriti bhramshad buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. So, dhyayato vishayan pumsa, if I think about sense objects, what happens? I will become attached. I will develop an attachment. What is attachment? It means that I develop a sense that I must have this, right? And then what happens as a result of attachment? The next step is lust, kam. Kam is desire. The most basic and prominent form of desire in this world is, of course, sex desire, the desire to have some type of sexual relationship. That is one common root meaning of kam, or lust. And that's very powerful. It's very strong. What happens when lust is unsatisfied? Anger arises. This is the next step in this causal loop. Anger arises, and then because of anger, one becomes deluded. One forgets what's right and what's wrong. And memory becomes bewildered. One forgets that there are consequences for acting wrongly. And then there's loss of intelligence, and someone acts in the heat of a moment and fall down. One loses whatever gain one may have acquired on the spiritual path. So this is actually a very important cycle to understand, because it all begins with our meditating on sense objects, and it ends with us going down. And the going down can mean that we forget about our spiritual path. It can mean that we commit a crime and we go to prison. It can mean that we perform a sinful act, an act which is improper, that causes pain and suffering to others, and we have to in turn go to a hellish condition and enter animal species. So all of the above can be involved in the concept of fall down. So what is the goal of spiritual progress? We want to achieve emancipation. It is also called Brahma Nirvana. Sometimes people think of Nirvana as kind of a entering the white light, but actually it is described that this emancipation can mean entering into a spiritual realm of existence, which is completely beyond this world. But it involves becoming free from false ego and free from attachment. And that is kind of the gateway. So one who is able to control the senses, regardless of external chaos, regardless of all the things that are happening in this world, one can achieve the mercy of the Lord and one can achieve supreme peace. So this is one of the very basic steps. So in summary, these are the basic things. Understand our identity. You are the eternal observer. You are not the temporary body. You are not this body. You can say, I am not this body. I am the soul. I am Atma. My nature is to have bliss. Anandamayo bhyasa. This is the statement of Vedanta Sutra. The Atma naturally seeks bliss. So we should not grieve for the inevitable changes of matter. Of course, any person who is sensitive, who is spiritually awake, also feels compassion for the suffering of others. It's not that we're indifferent. It's just that we know that this is inevitable and there's nothing that we can do about it. It doesn't mean that it's not sad, and it certainly doesn't mean that we're happy to see others suffering. That is a symptom of envy, which is very opposite to spiritual qualities. And then action. We should perform our duty according to what is correct, but we should not be attached to the result. This is called Buddhi Yoga. And finally, we must cultivate a higher taste. We cannot just say, I'm going to not think of chocolate. We have to find something better. All right, I'm going to develop a taste for drinking water instead. And that's the equivalent of I need to have a taste for my spiritual practices. And that's the only way that I can really withdraw from the sense objects and maintain my steady intelligence. So this is the basic summary of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And really, it is all about, finding the ways to, first of all, understand the self, understand this world, and understand how work with attachment leads to bondage, but being able to do proper work without attachment to the result leads to liberation. I hope this has been interesting, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone can sing with me. It's very easy. Chanting is a very good practice that will give us some freedom from anxiety. And it is a mantra, okay? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right.